Claire Whitman groaned softly as she flicked the switch in her kitchen. Nothing. The familiar hum of the refrigerator was gone, the light stubbornly dark. She pinched the bridge of her nose and glanced at the clock, 6:45 a.m., and knew she was already behind schedule. Lily, her 7-year-old, would need to be dressed, breakfast made, backpacks packed, and the car fueled before the school bell rang. Normally, mornings were chaotic but manageable. Today, the lack of electricity seemed to amplify every frustration she'd been carrying for weeks. She poured herself a cup of coffee anyway, using the old stovetop burner that still worked with gas. The steam curled in her face, warming her, but doing nothing to ease the gnawing anxiety of a powerless house. The hum of the city outside seemed distant, muted by the walls of her quiet home. She looked at Brandon's empty side of the bed as if expecting an answer to her silent question. He had been distant lately, always buried in work or lost in his own thoughts. She loved him, she did, but mornings like this made her feel achingly alone. After a hurried breakfast, she bundled Lily into her car and headed toward the school. The streets were already alive with the bustle of parents, children, and buses weaving between them. Claire's mind drifted over the week ahead, the endless work at the office, the unpaid bills, the small, nagging disputes with Brandon that never seemed to find resolution. By the time she dropped Lily off, her frustration had built into a tight knot in her chest. As she drove back home, she passed the small hardware store on Maple Street. There, leaning casually against the side, was Ryan Caldwell, the electrician the neighbor had recommended. He was tall, his dark hair slightly tousled, and there was something in the way he adjusted his tool bag with ease that caught her eye. Normally, she would have hesitated, worried about imposing, but today, with the electricity out and a sense of helplessness creeping over her, she found herself pulling into the lot. "Morning," she called, rolling down the window. "Morning," Ryan replied, his voice calm and professional. "I hear you've got a power problem." "I do," Claire said, suppressing the small pang of embarrassment at needing help. Would you be able to come take a look? I can drive you there." Ryan's polite smile didn't waver. "Sure, I can do that." She felt a strange sense of relief as he climbed into her car. It wasn't just that he was helping her, it was the presence of someone who seemed genuinely capable, someone who could shoulder the small weight of a problem she couldn't fix herself. As they drove through the quiet streets, she realized she hadn't expected to feel this sense of calm, this quiet hope. At home, Ryan immediately went to work, inspecting the fuse box, testing circuits, and muttering technical terms Claire only partially understood. She hovered nearby, pretending to be busy in the kitchen but unable to resist glancing at him occasionally. There was a rhythm to the way he worked, steady, meticulous, confident, that contrasted sharply with the scattered tension that seemed to define her life lately. "You've got a few faulty connections here," Ryan said after a while, pointing to a cluster of wires. "I can fix these, but it's going to take a little time." "That's fine," Claire replied. Her voice was softer than she intended. "Take whatever time you need." As he worked, they talked. Small talk at first, weather, the neighborhood, local schools, but gradually the conversation deepened. Ryan asked about Lily and the school she attended, his questions genuine, without the empty politeness Claire was used to from so many people. She found herself sharing stories about Lily's recent art project, the chaos of morning routines, and the quiet frustrations of managing the house alone when Brandon was preoccupied. He listened attentively, nodding, occasionally offering a laugh or a supportive word. Brandon called briefly while Ryan worked. Claire felt the old pang of disappointment at his distracted tone, the way he ended the call almost before she could respond. She realized, in that moment, how much she had been craving someone's undivided attention, not just casual conversation, but someone truly present. And there was Ryan, sitting on the edge of the kitchen counter, calmly explaining why certain circuits had failed, his dark eyes focused on hers for a fleeting second that made her heart thump a little faster than it should. By the time the lights flickered back on, the sun was higher in the sky, streaming through the windows. Claire stood back, taking in the warm glow filling her home. The coffee machine whirred back to life, the refrigerator hummed, and the familiar comfort of electricity returned. Yet, beneath the relief was something new. something unsettling. A quiet awareness that she had felt more seen, more understood in those short hours with Ryan than she had in months with Brandon. Ryan packed up his tools, ready to leave. "All set," he said with a professional smile. "Shouldn't be a problem for the next few months if you keep an eye on those connections." Claire walked him to the door, hesitating for a moment before saying, "Thank you, really, for everything today." He nodded. "Anytime, Claire. I'm glad I could help." She closed the door behind him, the sound echoing in the now bright kitchen. She leaned against it, hands gripping the handle tightly, trying to sort through the swirl of emotions in her chest. Relief, gratitude, guilt, longing, all mingled together in a confusing, unrelenting wave. She glanced at the clock again. Brandon would be home soon. Lily would be back from school later in the afternoon. Everything seemed normal, yet nothing felt the same. Sitting down at the kitchen table, Claire wrapped her hands around a warm mug of coffee, the sunlight reflecting off the freshly restored lights. She knew that today had shifted something inside her, something that would not easily return to the way it had been before. And as she stared out the window at the quiet street, she couldn't help but wonder how long she could ignore the quiet pull of attention and understanding she had felt today, and what it might mean for the life she thought she knew so well. The next morning, Claire Whitman woke with a lingering awareness of Ryan Caldwell's presence in her home the day before. She couldn't explain why, but the memory of his quiet attentiveness clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. She moved through her morning routine mechanically, packing Lily's lunch, checking the bathroom for toothpaste, making sure her daughter's shoes were tied just so. Yet her thoughts kept drifting back to the brief moments with Ryan, the way he had explained the faulty circuits, the ease of his conversation, the patience in his expression. It was as if a small, unspoken connection had formed between them, one that had no place in her carefully ordered life, and yet it refused to be dismissed. After dropping Lily at school, Claire drove to the grocery store to pick up supplies for the week. She found herself scanning the aisles almost absent-mindedly, thinking about the previous day's small interactions. Ryan had smiled at her once, just a brief, polite smile, but it had sent a flutter of something unexpected through her chest. She chastised herself silently. This was absurd. He was the electrician. That was all. He had come to fix a problem and leave. There was nothing more to it. When she returned home, she was surprised to find Ryan already in the driveway. He waved as she approached, holding a coil of cable in one hand. "Morning, Claire," he called out. His voice was steady, friendly, unassuming, but she felt a strange tension in her chest at hearing it again. "Good morning," she replied, forcing a casual tone. "Back so soon?" "Just checking in," he said. "Some of the connections I replaced yesterday are a little temperamental. I thought it'd be easier to come by before they cause trouble." Claire nodded, motioning for him to follow her inside. As he set down his tools, she noticed the way he moved with confidence and calm, completely in control of the chaos that often overwhelmed her. He began checking the circuits again, muttering technical details that she mostly didn't understand, but this time she didn't hover in the kitchen. She found herself settling at the table with a notebook, pretending to jot down reminders but really listening to his quiet explanations, the subtle humor he injected into otherwise mundane details. "You really know your way around a house," she said softly, almost without thinking. Ryan glanced up, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "I've been doing this a long time. Houses, wires, they don't change much, people do. And some people need a little extra patience." Claire's lips pressed together to keep from smiling. There was something in the way he said that, something that felt personal. She shook her head, chiding herself silently. "Stop it," she thought. "He's just an electrician. Nothing more." Hours passed. The house gradually came alive with the hum of electricity and the soft clicks of appliances working again. Ryan worked steadily, checking sockets and switches, while Claire lingered nearby, occasionally asking questions, feeling a strange warmth from his responses. She caught herself laughing quietly at one of his jokes, a low chuckle that seemed to fill the room with a comforting ease. "Mid-morning," Brandon called, checking in from work. Claire answered quickly, her voice polite but strained. Brandon sounded distracted, discussing deadlines, meetings, and minor complaints about a project he was managing. He didn't ask about her day, about Lily, about the household at all. Claire's chest tightened as she ended the call, feeling a pang she hadn't acknowledged before. She glanced at Ryan, who looked up from the fuse box, observing her without comment. And in that moment, she realized that he had noticed, too, noticed her disappointment, her frustration, and perhaps something more subtle she wasn't ready to name. They paused for a brief lunch together, a simple meal Claire had prepared earlier. Ryan sat across from her at the kitchen table, eating quietly but with an ease that made the moment feel strangely intimate. Conversation drifted from light topics to more personal anecdotes, stories from his childhood, challenges he had faced learning the trade, small victories that mattered more than anyone would think. Claire shared tidbits about Lily, about her own challenges balancing work and home, about the frustrations of feeling unheard. There was no judgment, no intrusion, only listening, only attention. By mid-afternoon, Ryan was packing up, preparing to leave. Claire walked him to the door, feeling an unexpected reluctance to see him go. "Thank you for today," she said softly, her voice quieter than usual. It really helped, more than I expected." Ryan nodded, adjusting the strap of his tool bag. "I'm glad. Really. It's not just about fixing wires, you know. Sometimes it's about making sure the house feels like home again." Claire smiled faintly, unsure why his words resonated so deeply. "Yes," she murmured, glancing back at the softly lit living room, the hum of the restored electricity comforting but oddly hollow compared to the presents he had brought. As he stepped outside, she noticed the way he paused at the car, hesitating for a fraction of a second before giving a small wave and walking away. That fraction of a second lingered in her mind long after he disappeared from sight. She closed the door, leaning against it for a moment, letting out a quiet breath. She felt both grateful and guilty, exhilarated and ashamed, all at once. Later, when Brandon came home, the house was alive with the sounds of modern appliances and the soft chatter of Lily recounting her day at school. Brandon greeted her with a distracted smile, barely glancing around the living room before retreating to his office. Claire poured herself a cup of tea, settling into the quiet corner of the kitchen. She watched Lily play, feeling the subtle pull of the day's earlier events, the attention, the listening, the warmth she hadn't realized she had been craving. She understood now that something had shifted inside her. Not physically, not in a way that could be labeled or explained easily, but emotionally, something had opened. The connection she felt with Ryan was innocent in one sense, but potent in another. It was a reminder of her own desires, her need to be seen, appreciated, and heard. It was a spark that lingered, quietly, but insistently, that night, as the lights glowed softly around the kitchen and the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Claire sat alone with her thoughts. She replayed the day, every laugh, every glance, every word that had resonated with her. She didn't know what it meant for her marriage, or whether she would act on it, or if it would remain nothing more than a fleeting awareness, but she knew it would stay with her. Like a quiet current beneath the surface of her carefully ordered life, something had awakened, and she could not ignore it. And as she finally went to bed, listening to the gentle breathing of Lily beside her, Claire realized that the day's events had done more than fix the electrical system in her home. They had illuminated a part of herself she had long forgotten. A part that wanted attention, understanding, and a reminder that she mattered. She closed her eyes, a mixture of guilt, excitement, and uncertainty swirling together, knowing that tomorrow would bring new choices, and new challenges she could not yet predict. The following morning, Claire Whitman woke to the familiar hum of electricity in her home, a reminder that Ryan Caldwell had come and gone, leaving the house fully restored. Yet the hum of appliances no longer felt mundane. It was charged with the weight of memory, the echo of conversations, and that brief but undeniable connection she had felt with him. She shook off the lingering thoughts, reminding herself that she had a life, a family, and responsibilities that demanded her attention. Still, the image of Ryan's patient smile refused to fade. Breakfast was quiet. Lily chattered about a new project at school, and Brandon glanced up from his laptop only once, muttering, "Don't forget Lily has a parent-teacher meeting next week." Claire nodded absently, pouring coffee into her cup, her mind elsewhere. The contrast between Brandon's distracted presence and Ryan's attentiveness the day before gnawed at her quietly. She felt a twinge of guilt for enjoying Ryan's attention, for noticing how alive she had felt, for thinking, even momentarily, about something beyond the walls of her marriage. Claire decided to tidy the kitchen before starting work on her own projects. As she wiped the counter, her thoughts wandered back to Ryan's gentle demeanor, the way he had listened without judgment, the way he had acknowledged her frustrations without turning them into criticism. She realized how long it had been since she had felt genuinely seen, not just as a wife or mother, but as a person. That realization pressed against her chest with a mixture of longing and unease. The doorbell rang, startling her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Brandon was in the office, and Lily was playing upstairs. Wiping her hands on a dish towel, she opened the door to see Ryan standing there, tool bag in hand. "Hi, Claire," he said, his voice steady, polite, but with a hint of familiarity that made her stomach tighten. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check in. Just wanted to make sure everything is still working properly." Claire hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to send him away, to protect the boundaries of her home and her marriage. But another part, the part that had been quietly aching for attention, for someone to notice her, for someone to validate her, welcomed his presence. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside. "I appreciate it." As Ryan moved through the house, checking switches and outlets, Claire found herself lingering nearby. Conversation started as technical updates, small explanations, questions about minor issues, but soon drifted into more personal territory. She talked about Lily's school projects, her own work frustrations, and the subtle strain she had been feeling with Brandon's distant behavior. Ryan listened, as always, with a calm attentiveness that made her feel both comforted and vulnerable. "It's important to feel heard," he said at one point, his voice low but firm. "Even small things, the ones that seem trivial, they matter." Claire nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. She wanted to tell him more, to confess the loneliness, the sense of invisibility she had carried for months. But she held back, aware that her marriage, fragile in ways she hadn't fully acknowledged, depended on restraint. The afternoon wore on. Ryan packed up, preparing to leave. Claire walked him to the door, her hands brushing the frame almost accidentally as she closed it behind him. She felt the pull of the moment, the quiet ache of unspoken emotions, and the stark reality of her choices. She had tasted attention, understanding, and connection in a way that Brandon had not offered in months, and she knew the danger of letting it linger. Brandon arrived home shortly after Ryan left, carrying groceries and muttering about work. He barely looked at Claire, dropping bags on the counter and heading toward the office. Lily ran past him, calling for her mother's attention, and he offered a distracted nod before disappearing behind closed doors. Claire watched him go, a hollow ache settling in her chest. She loved him, she truly did, but the distance between them had grown into something she could no longer ignore. That evening, Claire sat alone in the living room, the soft glow of the lamps illuminating the room. She replayed the day in her mind, the way Ryan had listened, the small gestures of attention, the quiet respect he had shown. She realized that the electricity he had restored was nothing compared to the spark he had ignited in her heart. And yet, she also recognized the danger. She was treading on fragile ground, caught between loyalty to her family and the undeniable yearning for someone to see her as she truly was. When Lily went to bed, Claire remained in the kitchen, staring at the dimmed lights, lost in thought. She knew she couldn't act on the attraction she felt toward Ryan, not directly, not physically, but she also knew that the emotional bond she had felt could not be erased by the flick of a switch. It was a quiet ache, a reminder of unmet needs, and a signal that something in her marriage required attention. Later that night, as Brandon worked late in the office, Claire picked up her phone. She stared at Ryan's number, a simple string of digits that represented both temptation and understanding. She didn't call. She didn't text. She simply set the phone down, her fingers lingering on the screen, and let herself feel the emotions she had been holding at bay. In the silence of the house, Claire realized that life had shifted subtly but irrevocably. The events of the past 2 days had shown her a mirror she hadn't wanted to look into, the mirror of her own desires, her own longing for connection, and the quiet neglect that had crept into her marriage. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if Brandon would notice, or if Ryan would ever return. But she knew one thing: she could no longer pretend that everything was fine, that her emotional needs could be quietly ignored, and as she turned off the kitchen light and climbed the stairs to bed, Clare understood that the choices she made from this point forward would define not only the future of her marriage but also the contours of her own heart. The spark that Ryan had ignited was still there, quietly glowing, and she knew it would take courage, honesty, and perhaps a reckoning with the past to navigate the path ahead. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft breathing of her daughter, feeling the empty stillness of Brandon's office, and letting the weight of the day settle over her. The house was alive with light and electricity, but Clare knew the true illumination, the one of understanding, attention, and quiet desire, was far more complicated, far more human, and far more dangerous than any circuit or switch.